Evening, I hope everyone's settled in and you're ready to roll. I often criticise professional demonstrators because we never see them do any technical turning. And what we're going to do tonight is, what I hope is one of these. It's got 8 lobes. That means we've got 9 turning centres. And I'm going to start with an obligatory bit of sycamore. I've just taken a Fosner bit, and a few seconds ago I just put in a chucking point which, anyway, there, to start the process. The other thing which I'd just point out on the lathe is, yep, I've got here what's called a thread protector. If you can find one for your lathe, it's really worthwhile getting one because it eases out most tapers that are tight. We've all had them, and you can just wind them off. It just, on the thread, just levers them out. I'm going to use one of my favourite old chucks. This thing has had 30 years of use and abuse. It's an Axminster Carlton. It's the predecessor to what they're now producing, and it's a really heavy, solid chuck and takes all the Axminster jaws that you could ever wish. So we'll just whip that onto there. And the thing will just slide in. Tighten it up. You've no need to tighten things up too much when you're doing this sort of thing. And if I slide that a little bit out of the way, we're okay. So the first thing which we need to do is to true the blank up and then mark out the piece. It is relatively important that you have it more or less a flat surface to start with. And you can see that using a centre pop is almost in there we are, relatively clean. And now I'm just going to true the face slightly and put in another chucking point. And then we can start marking the whole thing out. Right, I'm now just going to make the chucking point for turning later. So we've got one each side. I'm a believer in using calipers to to do this sort of thing. It just gives a more accurate way of doing it. Make sure you only ever put one point in and the other one's clear. Otherwise you're going to get a kick and it's going to come back at your face. I find that old tools, you know, they've got often quite a lot more life left in them than you would appreciate. I'm just using the wing now to clean that back down. Something I do on the bottom of my turnings is just, it's almost like a signature. And there we are. I'm not going to sand it down. I've got a big air extractor up here, and that's not a filter, it's an extractor. And it takes the air and the dust straight outside. If you're filtering, you're forever cleaning filters and looking at whether you need a new filter or, you know, is it blocked, is it time? And I find that is far better. It's an air conditioning unit from hot air central heating. It's also got variable speed control, so that if I want it, well, it takes a few seconds just to get going. And it's just going whoosh, straight out of the workshop. I know there was discussion at the last demonstration as to what was the best way to filter things. Well, an open door and that deals with virtually all the dust problems I have. I do far more turning than most of you, so I create a lot more dust. There we are. So the next thing we've got to do is to actually mark out all the lobes and everything else. I've got here what's, in actual fact, is an old Sorby sharpening thing, which I find is exceedingly good. I use it to sharpen all my scrapers, and the skews I have as well, I think. The only thing to always remember is put the nut back on, because you can't guarantee to get a replacement. Although you can't see it on the headstock here, I've got, if I put that in, you can see, there's a lock for, it's a spindle lock. Okay, if I bring this round, I can get a pencil, I can get it so that sometimes these things are a little bit fiddly. If I now just get a pencil and get it marking halfway up the spindle hole, right. I now need 8 divisions. That's the back of this machine. There's an indexer which I can just put in. And if I now set the numbers, if we go number 3, six, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Right, that's the basic marking out. If you then take a compass, and we're going to take a guess as to the middle of this. I say a guess, it's going to have to be relatively close to. Right, that's close enough. We now need to mark out the lobes on this thing, and the lobes, if I just go start there, I think this is perhaps easier done off the lathe, but I would just want to there we are. 1. And you can see very quickly, it's not terribly complicated laying out. Right, that's the first bit laid out. I'm now going to just go around and put in a thing on each of the okay. That's fine. We'll come back to that in a moment. The next little bit of this is to start to try to put a bit of shape into the back. Because what is going to happen is that we're going to take this off and we're going to use a donut chuck. If you've never seen a donut chuck, you can buy proprietary ones for anywhere between 100 and 150 quid. Or you can make one which would serve your purposes somewhat better for about 10 quid. And we'll be coming to that in a moment. So we need a little bit of shape into the back because we're not going to be able to turn this outside shape once we start on the donut. That becomes the foot. And I'm just going to start rounding round, taking this round. Okay, I don't need to do any more than that because the outside shape is going to be hand done at a slightly later stage. So now it's a case of enter the donut chuck. I don't know how many of you have ever seen a donut chuck or I've even thought of using one. But they are a remarkably simple and very versatile method of turning. So here we go. I'm just going to put that between the bars there. It'll help people see the Right, the donut chuck. The proprietary ones tend to be very hard plastic, and they've got fixed rods, and you have to take the whole of the outer sheet out of the thing to get anything inside. I've got what look like relatively long, but if you do make your own, you can have a series of these. It's just metric threaded bar, mile bar, and you just make yourself different lengths to fit with different sort of thicknesses of wood. On the back, I've got a nylon faceplate ring. Over the years, I've used lots and lots of these. I've never had one break. If you buy a carving board, you can get, for a £5, you can get probably half a dozen or 8 of these sorts of rings out of it. I've never broken one yet, and I suppose the nylon chopping boards from any of the major retailers will suffice. The opposite side face as a donut. If you cut it at an angle, you've got more room for your tools, and you simply sandwich the wood between the two. So in goes our blank. And now it's a case of setting up the chuck. So this takes a minute or two. It doesn't, all I've got to do is just wind the nuts down. The piece we're doing has got flat both sides. I quite often turn burrs, and if you get a big burr in and you're wanting to keep the rear surface intact, all you do is put a bag of polystyrene granules between the wood and the back of the chuck. It's perfectly adequate, it'll keep things in place, and it's quite simple to do things like that double bowl, which I sent a picture of into Steve, about a week or 10 days ago. The board is 1-inch MDF. The versatility of this is that if you're putting something in and it's sizable, you'll get bounce on the lathe. If you do that, or if you're going to do that, allow the lathe to get the blank to run to the heavy point at the bottom, and then I screw in, if I have to do. I've got several lumps of lead which act as counterbalances, and I can screw them in at any point on here, and that takes out the bounce if you're using big off-center pieces. It just makes things a little bit easier, a little bit safer. And I would commend you to just spend a few bob. I think I bought 2 metre-long threaded rods. I think they cost me about £3. Then you've got the nuts and the washers, a bit of board, a nylon board. So really, I don't think this thing actually has cost more than about 10 quid. And I've been playing around with it for quite a few years. So we're starting to get somewhere. The next thing is to get this onto the lathe. Don't worry about things sticking out at the back. Your hands aren't at the back. And it allows, you know, different things. You can see also where I've had counterweights in the thing over the years. It just works fine. I'm fortunate as a wood turner in that I've been turning for a long time, and it means I've acquired a number of chucks. So I find it easier to change the chuck than change the jaws. There is a dovetail slope on the nylon so that it is pulling it in onto the thing. So right, there's the first little obstacle done. Remember on the blank, I put these pops. That's because I'm going to use those as the centres of the lobe. This little bit can be a tiny bit fiddly. So now that blank is now held in place by the revolving centre at the back. And it's just a case of we have to tighten up things so that it's
about wing nuts, or would they be too dangerous?
You could use wing nuts, yeah. I find that the more complicated things are, the more, you know, you tend to lose them. You can get the bits anywhere. I've had bits of wood in this which have, you know, been weighing, I don't know, 25 kilos, I guess, and you can turn them even if they're off centre at that, provided that you've got some flexible backing and, as I said, a bag of polystyrene granules, and we're away. Okay. Now, you have to repeat this, and I'll try and avoid turner's elbow. You don't know what turner's elbow is, you haven't been turning very long. Because it's a relatively big diameter, we're off centre. There's no real weight in it. I don't need to, you know, put any extra weights on the back. The lathe will cope with it. It weighs about, I think this thing is about 300 kilos all told. When you start these things up, always just initially step to one side. Now, a little bit of turning, not very much. I'm standing to one side slightly because I'm trying to give camera angles. From my position, I can see the outer mark on the depression. So it's fairly simple. That's why you take a little bit of care putting these round so that you can actually see how far you want to go. I nearly always, when I'm turning, resort to my ring tool. A lot of people don't get on with ring tools. I quite like them because you can start at the centre and come out. Because the lathe speed is so low, it means getting a clean cut across the bottom of the hole, the first dish, is a little bit more difficult than what you'd actually imagine. You can see it's pulling at this point here. It is out of centre. It bounces across. You're going to have to, as I say, faff and fiddle to try and find the best tool to get across the base. A flat grind on a bowl gouge is probably going to do the job. Possibly should be a bit deeper. So that's our wall thickness there. It's a bit rough on the bottom. I'll try and bring the speed up without shaking the lathe to bits. Because we aren't going to have the opportunity to go back to that, and also because you've got all this hanging around it, sanding is a little bit more, should we say, difficult and perhaps you could almost say dangerous than sanding on a normal bowl. There is a relatively simple solution. If you go to Harrogate, this is just an extension. It just goes in, pop them in. It keeps your fingers way away from the rotating bowl. So I don't like putting my fingers in there. There's too many things which you can catch. Oh, sorry. That's 120. I'll just take it up to 240. We don't want to be spending too much time sanding. So that's not bad. Now 240. That's the first lobe done. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just slackening one or two of these just a little bit to try to get this to move. And you can see it's a repeat. Move it around, get the centre in, I hope. Come on. Sometimes you'll get one of these that seems to stick slightly. And there we are. I should now be able to move this round to the next. It is a bit fiddly. Okay. Right, what we've done now is we've done one division, and I've simply moved around onto the next little thing, and we've got the same to do there. So it's not a lot of turning, and it's not even terribly difficult turning. It's just a matter of making sure you always keep your fingers out of the way. And there's more to catch you on this than there is on most things. So, once more. The knocking is where it's going over the adjacent section, which is one of the reasons it's quite difficult to get a good finish just like this. See where we are. Now that, you can see, is somewhat thicker than that, so I've got to take a little bit more off and try to sort it out. A small ball gouge. Still a fraction more. If, when I did the initial laying out, I'd turned and put another ring inside, I would have had something to turn to. Just something that I tend not to do, but it does make it a little bit easier, I think. When you're using a donut chuck and you're turning something which is fairly small, a little bit, you become very conscious of the size of the thing, and it is a little bit restricted because you're always working considerably further over your tool rest than you would do in conventional turning. And it's something you've just got to think about and just be that little bit more careful. And once again, yeah, it's pulling just on the bottom. I don't really want to go any faster, so I'm just going to have to take it, sand it out. It bounces, it crosses the margin here every time, and that's partly the reason it's somewhat more difficult to get a good finish. Hooking things up there. Okay, that's not too bad. And it's a repeat now of trying to move the block around a little bit further. Surely that'll move now. Yeah. And that's moved round to, I think, the third. But I think it's worth trying to do something different, and using different sorts of kit, particular kit that you can make yourself and not. And it does increase what you can actually do quite a lot. So we're now to the stage of doing yet another lobe. We're not going to get in this demonstration all these lobes turned off. And Steve has just suggested, and I think it's a very good one, that I turn one more, and then I can show you how I set about doing the outside. And once again, that's not very difficult at all. I'll just take this bit out, and we'll try and do a bit on the outside. I knew it had moved on the centre. Right, what I'm going to have to do is... That's the first part of the cock-up. What I'll do is I'll remove this from the lathe and move on to just how we set about the outside. It is relatively simple, and hopefully you'll get an idea as to how you get on.
Design change and a sort of
Well, no, not really. I mean, what I'll do is I'll simply go back in. You can turn it out, but I'm not going to get the outside done. So, one of the most versatile bits of homemade kit you can actually get hold of for very little money. You can, if you use your imagination a little bit, you can do all sorts of things with them, and I would encourage you to make one. If you buy one, you're going to spend a lot of money, but you won't have the option of screwing on counterweights or working with one or two of the bars out. It does actually restrict you quite a lot if that is solid and those bars are solid and not interchangeable. So that's that. The outside is just as complicated as the inside, says he with his tongue in his cheek. If there's an easy way to do something, use it. I'll go back to the original chuck. Where did I put it? I put it back on its peg. I'm just going to turn off the lathe. I've had occasions when I've been very careless and switched the lathe on just by brushing across the switch with my... Come on. All I've done is just turn it around, and if there's an easy way to do something, take it. I find these little tools are absolutely brilliant, particularly on software with this and you can get a flat profile, you get a curved profile, and they really are very good. And now it's just literally microplane, yeah. Sorry. It's just me being a little rough. Yeah, these microplane things, they're razor sharp, and they come in a coarse and a fine medium. Yeah, coarse, fine and medium, I think there is in them. And they're about 10 quid. You buy the handle with one, but then you can buy the different profiles of these. And when lockdown started, I decided that I was going to have to make things which took rather more time, simply because I got a winter's worth of turning, or 2 winters' worth of turning in stock, and no sales and no chance of getting rid of it. It's an age-old problem with wood turners, and I'm no different to anyone else on that score. And you can see very quickly, you're getting down. It does take a little time. It's not technically difficult. All I'm doing is just rasping wood away. I guess if I really wanted, I could take a little bit out with a bandsaw to start with if I wanted. But bandsaws get cut into wood exceedingly quickly, particularly when you've got something that size, and I fought shy. And you can see really a few hours is going to take to get these things down, but it's something different. It's something which people tend to say, ooh, and I have a number of sales a year, and you always need, or I always need, to have something which people can say, how's that being done? You know, it's the one constant that, and particularly when people tend to come back, they want to know, oh, what's different? What have you done new? My wife did a calculation the other day. She went through her old books. Since I retired 15 years ago, we've sent about 50,000 away to Cafford. If you wonder why I choose to go to Cafford, when I was young, I used to do a lot of climbing and mountaineering, and I went to South America, to the Andes, and we went to a mountain called Hoscaran, which was quite high, isolated, and in consequence we had to walk in. And we passed through villages. And these villages, they were charming, they were so hospitable, it really wasn't true. When we came back, we found out that the tradition was that when they got very short of food, they had a family meeting, decided who was the least useful member of the family, and let them starve to death. And we could have given them food. And that's something that sort of lived with me. I know that it sounds funny, but it also gives me a purpose for wood turning. You know, what the hell am I making this for? And all the other things. If, you know, what are you going to do? Sell them, give them away? If you haven't been turning very long, believe me, it won't be very long before the children say, oh, another bowl, or another egg cup, or another pen. And because of the sales and what I do, that's the impetus for me to continue turning. I mean, you can see relatively quickly how we're coming around. It isn't difficult. It's just time-consuming. As I said, I started to make things in lockdown which take longer because I didn't want any more stuff, cluttering up the house inside. I've got a very understanding wife. We don't have a sitting room. We have a wood warehouse, quite literally. Fortunately, there's only the two of us at home now, so it does mean that, we don't actually need the sitting room like we used to do. And I don't know how far to go on this, but it's very easy to see how you form the loops, do everything else. It looks so complicated. In actual fact, so once you've got yourself a donut chuck, it's dead simple. It's dead simple to do lots of other things as well. I've made many different things using the donut chuck. Double bowls with a natural back, just the bark, or sub-bark. You can never work out how it's done. You've got two bowls out, no chucking point on the back at all. So I would say, if you want a bit of fun and you want to play around and do something different, build yourself a donut chuck and just see what you can do with it. And it's the same with lots of kit. I do think that we get obsessed by, what the manufacturers make. A great many of my tools here I've made. That is a brilliant little scraper. It's just an old chisel, reshaped. And you can go down the inside of a box, deep box, and just use this profile. There you are, that's another just thing. And these are tools I made, and I find I go back to them time and time and time again. You can see, I've got a great array. These tubes have got a bar through the bottom, stop the things falling through. It also lets the sawdust fall through. But the things within easy reach, just down here, my little tools, are nearly all homemade. And the things I use every time I turn. And just don't learn to use the tools you've got if you're a beginner before you get very far. And this is just a matter of continuing shaping with the tool.
How do you create the final finish?
Just hand sanding.
But hand sanding, just a piece of paper?
Just a piece of paper. I have an array of different sanding things that I put inside, and I just wind the drill up fairly high. The thinner, the smaller, these things I put on, and different grades. Nothing on that one, but 400 at one end, 320, 400.
So if you were smoothing that off?
If I was smoothing that off, yes, I will go down with that, and then I'm simply, I'll leave that there. I'm just going to be in like that. Takes a while, and I've got different grits on all of them. I do use little bits of sandpaper. You know, sometimes it'll just be that. Handy. Another thing I use. There we are. It's a little bit of Formica. And if I want to score the bottom of a groove, I just put that into it so you can score the bottom of a groove. I've got a piece of 120 on that. It's a little bit of substance, a bit more than a piece of paper, and just take them off. You know, take it up, put a different new one on, put a different grade on. It's what works for you. And I have these all the time. I mean, if I'm going to do a hollow form, I go in with those. I just put them into a small chuck, and you know, you've got the right rotation. You can get 90% of it done with that. You're restricted with the hole size, but I've got smaller ones, I've got bigger ones. In wood turning, I'm certain that it's what works for you, not what Lance, who most of you know. Lance is naturally left-handed, and he tries to turn right-handed. And I sometimes watch and think, just do it the other way around. Turn it left-handed as opposed to trying to turn it right-handed. And, you know, if you're on a bow, I always start there and work out. If you try and cut that way, you're cutting into the wood. You know, if you sharpen a pencil, you don't go straight into it, do you? You slice with the grain. It's always that bit easier. And little finishing aids, little sanding aids. I've got a collection here. Yeah, I think like this is going to take a good few hours to take it right to finish. But they are nice when they're done. I don't know where I put it here. You know.
Have a look at what wood is this?
This is cherry.
Okay, from the back. So this is what you were working on on the lathe?
Yeah, just on the lathe and just bring it in, just bring them round. Yep. There's the foot. I've already marked the foot out to start with, so I've got a flat in the donut chuck. And it's different. I think they're attractive. And technically they're not very difficult to make. They're just time consuming. And you can do that shape, you can do one with twice as many lobes if you really want. So you've got little, you know, I made one, I binned it, but I did make one with 16 lobes. And it meant that I got 16 little cups around the outside with a big recess in the middle. It was okay, the wood was lousy. I found out it got worm in when I got part way through it, and I dumped it. But it's
I made jewellery boxes with like 6 little compartments.
Yeah.
In the same way that you've done there, but I didn't use a donut chuck. I just screwed it onto a base.
Yeah, if you use a ring as opposed to a faceplate, you can see I just have all over the place. But if you have that, you screw it on, and then you take 5 out and just rotate it. You're changing the effect. You get all sorts of things, and that's when I do wall art. And I got off-centre wall. That's all I'm doing is on the back, screwing this, unscrewing it, moving it around. You're not going to see the screw holes on the back. I know it's the professional wood turners will say, oh, you shouldn't have a screw. People don't care a toss when you can't see it behind the thing. So, faceplate rings, I reckon, are one of the great things to make. And that, is what 15, 20 pence.
Yep.
That, 15, 20 pounds.
Yeah.
I've never had one of these break. The donut chuck's on one. I've got a sanding disc here on.
Yep.
Butcher's boards, chopping board.
Yeah.
And I think the last one I got was 50 pence from IKEA. This material is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I make chuck jaws out of it as well. If you turn two circles and you stick one on top of the other, you've got sufficient depth to make your own chuck jaws. So all I can say is just think about things. I'd rather, and in a funny way, the challenge of actually making something to do the job is also really very good. I was playing around, and that's a jig for making staves.
Making what, sorry?
Staves. If you're going to make a stave construction thing, I tried to make one where the staves were in 3 sections, and between each section was a coloured wood, so they sat one on top of the other. And I found that is the way to do it. I can change the angle just by taking those out, so you can make any angle you want. And just another thing, make it easier. If you're going to cut on a bandsaw and you want to cut round, don't be daft. Keep your fingers and make a carrier. And I just set them down on there, and that's okay. The old one's worn out, but I used to have a strap that went over the top. And so you just pull it down, a little over centre strap, and that did it. What else have I got in there? A thing for drilling pens. That's what I use for turning my Whitby widgeon. Just pop a ball in there, and you've got some, you can leave it out. One of the most, this is almost one of the most valuable things. I think I've always got a block I can turn, re-chuck things over with. If you turn something and there's an offcut on the back, just keep them. You can reshape that 3 or 4 times before you bunk. There's one for holding a ball. If I want to turn eyes like you do with an owl, I just pop it in there. Something we're playing with. I'll see where it goes. Offcuts. They're great because you're only going to bin them and turn them into shavings. Yet they sort of aid all sorts of things in the making. So, gents, I would encourage you to do that. I think at the last demo, someone was asking about sharpening and sharpening systems. Well, if you get white aluminium silicate things, Sorby actually sell them, you know, with an MDF disc on the back, a little ring, and that comprised on the table is what I would advise anyone to start sharpening, you know, certainly scrapers with. You can do it cheap as chips. You can go out and spend 200 quid on a sharpening system and you won't get an edge on a scraper any better than you'll get off that. So, you know, that there, just, I'm sure you can organise an angle, a bit of angled wood. Yeah, I've spent 30 years turning. I've spent a fortune that I shouldn't have spent on bits and pieces. And the answers are often there just staring you in the face. Okay? I think that's probably it, is it?